2005, that was really the first year where they were, the first full year where they were able to track freediver fatalities. And so you can see from this graph from 2005, we had worldwide about 21 fatalities. Remember, these are reported fatalities. This does not represent all of the fatalities that are happening, only the ones that people report to Dan. And that number tripled to 2008 as 60. Right now, and the red is the US, so you can see that we're pretty high ranking as far as fatalities worldwide. This year, Dr. Pollack told me that based on the reports that he has already received, we will be in the high 80s by the end of the year for fatalities, so it's continuing to rise. By the way, this Freediver, the breath hold incident database, if you know of anybody who's been in a fatal event, or if you know about a near fatal event, it's very easy for you to go to divewise.org. You can click on a link at the top of the homepage and register a incident report. These reports are used. We collect this data. It's scientifically analyzed. It's helped us to understand the triggers for fatal events, and that's how we're able to tailor training for people like you. Just a quick look at what happens in freediver blackout for people who may not know. As the diver descends to death, water pressure increases. And when that happens, oxygen pressure is increasing, and so more oxygen is available to the diver, even as the diver is consuming oxygen on descent. But on ascent, the opposite happens. The water pressure is decreasing the further up you go in the water column, and therefore oxygen pressure is decreasing because as the lungs are re-expanding, the circulating blood is actually literally being sucked out of the bloodstream and into your lungs, and being less and less available to your brain. So if the oxygen that's circulating falls to a certain level, then you'll lights out, you're in blackout. The blackout zone, the danger zone, is -30. This is this last atmosphere where your body's going through the most dramatic changes, and even at the surface, as was previously mentioned. So that's where you're most vulnerable. So I'm going to talk to you about a few things that you can do to protect yourself. This is based on the statistical data that we get from the breath hold reports from the fatal events. The best thing that you can do to protect yourself from not surviving blackout is to dive with a buddy. And you want to choose your partner wisely. Choose someone that you can trust with your life. Someone that you can count on to watch you while you're diving, to not get distracted by something else going on, like a super great fish flying by you. Someone who dives at your same skill level so that they'll be able to reach you and dive to your level. Someone that is going to dive with you one up, one down. Direct supervision is only possible if the one diver remains at the surface and watches you before, during, and after your dive. That 30 seconds after your dive is very important, as Kirk mentioned. Overweighting is a problem with spearfishers, particularly because it's a lot easier to descend and conserve oxygen when you're heavily weighted. But being overweighted can mean, in the instance of blackout, that you never surface again. So, because if you remember the screen that I just showed you with the graph of the blackout zone, it's at -30. So being neutrally buoyant with your weight at -30 is a good idea because that's where you're most vulnerable. So if you black out in that area and you're neutrally buoyant at -30, the chances of you floating up to the surface are pretty good. And that's how you can get noticed by your buddies and recovered. So another important thing with your weight belt, if you feel that you're at risk at any moment, Not everybody gets these hypoxic symptoms, pre-blackout symptoms, but some people do. If that were to happen to you, or you have that little voice talking to you in your ear, gee, I think I've been down here a little bit too long. Maybe I've been working with this fish a little longer than I should have. That's a good indication that you need to go ahead and let go of your belt and head for the surface. And if you are engaged in a rescue situation, the first thing you do is get rid of your weight belt. This is burning oxygen. You want to eliminate that because you're going to have to conserve as much as possible in order to successfully complete that rescue. And when you reach your buddy, releasing his weight belt as well is very, very important. The AMA divers have known for centuries that in order to successfully complete repeated dives, that you need to rest at the surface. So a good way to, a good rule of thumb for this is to rest at the surface twice as long as your previous dive. So if your dive was a minute, you're at the surface for 2. It's very hard to gauge this if you're not timing it. So a lot of my dive friends tell me that they watch their watch at the surface to make sure that they haven't misjudged that. You're really ready to get going and get back down, and it seems like you've been at the surface long enough. If you're not watching it on your watch, you're not really going to have a good gauge of how long you've been at the surface. And as Kirk said, if you've had any hypoxic symptoms, blue lips, samba, an actual blackout, then you need to stop diving for the day. Your body has been put into a state that it needs to recover from. It's going to take some time. Hyperventilating. A lot of people tell me, I don't hyperventilate. I do pre-dive breathing. I'm lowering my heart rate. Hyperventilating, the definition of it is breathing, any breathing that's in excess of your body's metabolic needs. So if you're engaged in that, you're hyperventilating. If you hyperventilate more than 2 to 3 deep breaths, and this is what's recommended by the Navy, they have done research studies on this, how are divers, what sort of breathing that can they do at the surface and still be safe. If you're breathing more than 2 to 3 deep breaths, you're not increasing your oxygen stores, you're offloading your CO2. CO2 is your friend that's going to let you know when it's time to breathe. If you get rid of your friend, then you're not going to get that signal in time, and you're going to be more likely to black out. So, limiting your diving, your pre-dive. Now you get to see all these pictures you couldn't see before. So we're going to look at some of the near fatal events. I've got 4 good ones. They're all a little different. They're actual events. You can back up, Robert. There you go. Okay. See? It was a great picture. So let me just set this video up a little bit. This was done by Terry Moss and Sherry Day shortly after the boys' accident in April of last year. And they did this video to help promote freedive safety education. I pulled this clip from it. I want you to know a little bit about the boys' abilities because it's important in context of what happened that day. The boys have been freediving since they were 3 and spearfishing since they were 8 and 9. They had a lot of experience. Robert was an intermediate trained freediver. And the boys were very comfortable with many hours spearfishing and freediving with their father. And so on Robert's 20th birthday, he of course wanted to go spearfishing with his friends. So he and his brother loaded up 3 of their friends and they headed out in the morning and they were going to spearfish all morning and then meet up with us later in the afternoon. And so they were going to do a couple of deep dives just for fun, the 2 of them. The other boys were not very proficient freedivers. And so they started this 90-foot freedive, and this is where the video picks up.